She was once one of the most trusted figures inside the royal household, tasked with protecting and nurturing the future king and queen's children. But without warning, she vanished from public view. Now, after years of silence, she's speaking out, and what she reveals about her exit from William and Catherine's home will leave the world in shock. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. She entered the palace as a quiet professional background in early childhood development, fluent in multiple languages, and personally selected after a rigorous vetting process. Her role was clear: to care for Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis with discretion, compassion, and precision. She was present during their most formative moments, from first words to first tantrums, from sleepless nights to public appearances. To the outside world, she was invisible. Inside the royal household, she was indispensable. The children adored her. Even staff referred to her as the fourth parent. But then, she disappeared. One day, she was walking with Charlotte in the palace gardens. The next, her quarters were empty, her name wiped from internal communications, and not a single explanation was offered to the press or the public. What followed was a silence louder than any statement. Royal watchers noticed the shift immediately, and speculation ran wild. Some claimed she had been dismissed. Others whispered of a personal scandal. Yet every inquiry was met with the same stonewalling from Kensington Palace. No comment. In the tabloids, her name was scrubbed. In royal circles, she became a ghost. For years, there was nothing. Then, just weeks ago, she re-emerged softly but purposefully. A cryptic public comment at a charity event caught the attention of reporters. When asked about her time in royal service, she replied, "There are stories I was never allowed to tell, until now." That single sentence sent shockwaves through the royal community and reignited a mystery the palace had desperately tried to bury. Now, for the first time, she's ready to speak. Not with vengeance, but with clarity. And not to destroy, but to expose a truth she believes the public deserves to hear. This is no tabloid tale. It is a layered account of trust lost, loyalty tested, and emotional fault lines buried beneath the gilded perfection of royal life. She says she never wanted to leave, but something happened. Something that crossed a line no one expected. And if her account holds true, it could be one of the most damaging personal revelations the House of Windsor has ever faced. But to understand what truly drove her away, we must first go back to the beginning, where royal glamour and private tension quietly collided. To the outside world, Kensington Palace is a symbol of privilege and tradition. But behind its gates, a different reality unfolds, one filled with strict protocols, suffocating rules, and hidden hierarchies. For the Nanny, adapting to this world meant surrendering her identity and ultimately her voice. From the moment she accepted the position, she understood discretion would be paramount. But nothing could have prepared her for the emotional toll of total invisibility. She was trusted with the most intimate moments of royal life, yet barred from acknowledging them. The children adored her. George would call for her during thunderstorms. Charlotte sought her comfort after nightmares, and Louis giggled at her lullabies. But to the wider institution, she was a ghost. She entered rooms after events had ended. She ate alone. Her name never appeared in any official briefings, her contributions never credited. The closer she became to the children, the further she was pushed from the spotlight, and the palace liked it that way. Royal protocol dictated every movement: where she stood, what she wore, what she could say, and more importantly, what she could never say. Any deviation, however innocent, was seen as a threat to the image the monarchy worked tirelessly to control. The Nanny's quiet diligence began to draw unwanted attention, not from the public, but from within the walls of the palace itself. Senior staff, accustomed to rigid class lines and well-defined roles, grew wary of her growing influence. Aides began watching her more closely. Innocent moments, like a child clinging to her in public, were flagged as inappropriate displays of affection. When she was photographed walking with George during an off-duty moment in the countryside, an internal memo was circulated, warning staff about unsanctioned exposure. She was called into a meeting. No press statement followed, But the reprimand was firm and final. She was to be seen less. It became clear that the real issue wasn't her conduct, it was her connection. The emotional bond she had nurtured with the children became a source of quiet jealousy and growing resentment. Whispers circulated through the household. Staff who once greeted her with warmth became guarded. Meetings that once included her were suddenly moved or forgotten. The palace didn't need to fire her, they only needed to isolate her. And it worked. She stopped offering opinions, she withdrew. And slowly, she began to understand the unwritten rules of surviving royal employment. Loyalty was not a two-way contract. It was demanded, not returned. But what hurt most wasn't the rules. It was what she began to see within the family itself. Because, as her world constricted, cracks began to appear in theirs. Whispers behind doors. Silence at the dinner table. The smiles in public, strained behind the scenes. Something was shifting in the dynamic between William and Catherine, and the children, bright and sensitive, were beginning to notice. Yet it wasn't just the institution that unsettled her. It was a growing fracture inside the family itself, one she could no longer ignore. They are Britain's golden couple, but behind palace walls, Prince William and Princess Catherine are said to have faced private struggles that few could see. And according to the nanny, it was the children who absorbed the weight of those silent battles. What began as subtle shifts soon became patterns impossible to ignore. The laughter that once filled the nursery grew quiet. William, once so present in the children's routines, started missing bedtime more frequently. Catherine, though graceful in public, appeared increasingly withdrawn in private. There were mornings when the two passed each other in silence, barely exchanging a glance. The staff whispered, but the nanny saw it all up close, and more importantly, she felt it through the children. George began acting out during lessons. Charlotte, once so eager to please, became guarded. Even Louis, too young to understand the complexities of adult tension, clung more tightly to his nanny with each passing day. They didn't need words. They felt the change in the air. The nanny, trained to protect not just the children's bodies but their emotional well-being, grew concerned. She tried, cautiously, to speak with household staff. Doors closed. She gently raised her observations with Catherine, offering support rather than judgment. What she received in return was a composed but pointed warning. Stay in your lane. Still, her position meant she couldn't turn a blind eye when things escalated. One afternoon, in what she described as a rare moment of rawness, she walked into a room where Catherine and William were engaged in a heated exchange. It stopped the moment they saw her, but the children had already heard enough. That night, George refused to eat dinner. Charlotte asked her why Mummy was crying, but it wasn't just the silence or the arguments. It was what came next. A quiet policy shift in the children's discipline protocol, ordered directly by William, which clashed with the nanny's own developmental guidance. She pushed back, privately and respectfully, but it sparked a confrontation. William saw it as insubordination. Catherine, already uneasy about how close the children had grown to the nanny, saw it as a challenge to her role as mother. And then came the words that changed everything. According to the nanny, during a tense conversation, Catherine said plainly, "You're overstepping." The accusation wasn't shouted. It didn't need to be. It landed with the force of finality. That moment became a fracture, one that could not be repaired with apologies or reassurances. The nanny had always known her role was temporary, but she never imagined being made to feel like a threat to the very children she had loved and protected, like her own. And yet, despite the emotional wounds and rising pressure, she remained because the children needed stability. They needed safety. Still, she might have endured it all, if not for the one incident that changed everything. It happened on a rainy Thursday, an event that seemed minor to outsiders, but behind closed doors, it shattered trust permanently. The morning had begun like any other tight schedules, carefully crafted outfits, and last-minute briefings for a public appearance set to feature the children. Prince George was expected to accompany his parents for a small staged visit to a local school, a light-hearted photo opportunity meant to showcase the future monarch's growing confidence. But behind the scenes, George had been showing signs of anxiety for days. The nanny had noticed the change. He was quiet, withdrawn, and unusually hesitant about facing cameras. The night before, he had confided in her that he didn't want to go, that he felt overwhelmed. She listened, reassured him, and gently relayed her concerns to senior staff that morning, fully expecting compassion. What she received instead was accusation. When George didn't appear alongside his parents, a brief wave of concern swept through media outlets, but the official statement claimed he was under the weather. Inside the palace, however, there was panic. The missed appearance, no matter how trivial, was viewed as a reputational misstep, and someone had to be blamed. That afternoon, the nanny was summoned without notice. In front of several staff members, a senior aide accused her of manipulating George, of allowing her emotional influence to disrupt royal protocol. She was stunned. When she attempted to defend herself, she was cut off. Her voice, so trusted by the children, meant nothing in that moment. Catherine stood by, silent. And while her eyes revealed a flicker of internal conflict, she said nothing. That silence hurt more than the words that followed, because it was Prince William who delivered the final blow. According to the nanny, he walked in mid-meeting, already briefed, and without hesitation told her, "You were never supposed to be more than the help. You've forgotten that." The words were sharp, unfiltered, and cold. She didn't cry. Not then, not in front of them. But as soon as the meeting ended, she returned to her quarters, quietly packed her bags, and informed the children she was going away for a while. George asked if he had done something wrong. Charlotte wouldn't let go of her hand. Louis, too young to understand, waved goodbye with a smile. She left that night through a back entrance, no send-off, no acknowledgement, no closure. Everything she had poured into that household was swept aside with a single, ruthless decision. And yet, she didn't speak. Not then. Not for years. Because even in exile, she believed in protecting the family, especially the children. But even after she left the palace grounds, the shadow of royal silence followed her until now. The palace was swift. Within hours of her departure, a coordinated operation was in motion. Emails erased, statements drafted, and a story spun for the press. But the nanny kept records, and now, the truth they tried to bury is coming to light. By morning, the air inside Kensington Palace was deceptively calm. Outwardly, it was business as usual. But beneath the surface, the royal communications machine was already in full gear, crafting a response meant to kill curiosity before it could spread. A brief press statement was issued. "We thank her for her dedicated service and wish her well in her future endeavours." No explanation. No details. Just a vague line designed to satisfy headlines and stifle questions. Internally, staff were informed to offer no comment, and close associates were sent scripted talking points prepared and approved by senior aides. Everyone was to repeat the same phrase. She left on amicable terms. That was the official truth. But behind the scenes, the pressure was far less polite. Within a day, the nanny was contacted by a palace legal representative. She was reminded of her contractual obligations, specifically the non-disclosure clause she had signed upon employment. Then came the veiled threat should she speak to the media or even privately share her experiences. Her severance could be withheld, and further legal action might be considered. But what they didn't know, or perhaps underestimated, was that she had quietly kept her own records, not for revenge, not for leverage, but to preserve the reality of her time inside one of the world's most secretive households. She had journaled daily, documenting her concerns, her observations, and most importantly, her fears about how it would all eventually end. Still, the palace wasn't finished. The very next day, a carefully curated photo of the Wales family was released to the press. William, Catherine, and the children smiling in a sun-drenched garden, exuding warmth and unity. It was a strategic distraction, meant to flood the media cycle and draw attention away from the swirling rumours. And for a while, it worked. Journalists stopped calling. Editors lost interest. The story was buried under a mountain of royal PR polish. but not for her. She watched it unfold from afar, heartbroken and furious. The narrative was false, the silence forced, and every image of the children only reminded her of the love she was no longer allowed to show. She stayed quiet, just as they had demanded, but not idle. Her records remained intact. Dates, times, conversations. Nothing embellished, nothing deleted. It was all there. Her truth, untouched by spin. And now, with the passage of time and the rise of public questions too loud to ignore, she is finally ready to reveal what the palace could not control. Because even the most powerful institutions can't control everything, especially when compassion turns into quiet defiance. She was known for her grace, but behind that poise, Catherine, Princess of Wales, allegedly issued a quiet ultimatum: choose the children or leave the house. In royal households, boundaries are everything spoken and unspoken, written and felt, and over time, one line had begun to blur: the line between professional care and maternal connection. As the nanny's presence grew more integral to the children's emotional lives, so too did Catherine's discomfort. It wasn't overt at first, just a flicker of hesitation when George ran into the nanny's arms before his mother's, or the slight pause when Charlotte reached for her hand at a public engagement. But within the palace, where control is currency and perception is power, even the smallest gestures can ignite quiet fires. And this one, it seems, did just that. According to leaked reports, Catherine voiced her concerns during a confidential conversation with a senior royal advisor. She admitted, with what was described as calm but firm language, that she felt increasingly pushed out of her own role. The advisor, bound by duty, relayed the message up the chain, where it reached people with the authority to act. What followed was a subtle campaign to recenter Catherine as the primary maternal figure in both public and private life. And the easiest way to accomplish that? Remove the competition. The nanny was never publicly reprimanded. But behind closed doors, the term emotional entanglement began surfacing. She was no longer seen as staff, she was seen as interference. The nanny, heartbroken, began to feel it too. George had taken to calling her my best grown-up. Louis, barely speaking full sentences, would cry when she left the room. But rather than being praised for the secure emotional space she created, she was painted as a threat to the royal dynamic. Every act of care, once appreciated, became suspect. Every moment of comfort now scrutinized. She had given her heart to the children, only to be seen as if she were stealing theirs. And then came the conversation that changed everything. In a private meeting, Catherine allegedly delivered the line that ended it all. With no malice in her tone, she simply said, "You have to decide what role you want to play. You can't have both." It wasn't a demand. It was a decision disguised as diplomacy. The nanny understood what was truly being asked. Step aside, or you will be removed. So she did. Not out of defeat, but for the children's sake. She believed that a sudden scandal or forced dismissal would damage their sense of stability even further. Quietly, she prepared her exit. She left not because she had overstepped, but because she loved them enough to know when her presence might cause harm. That, she would later say, was the most painful decision she had ever made. But walking away from the royal family is never the end, especially when your silence threatens their image. Just weeks after her departure, headlines began to swirl: anonymous leaks, twisted stories, character assassinations. But now, with proof in hand, the former nanny is ready to reveal the campaign that was launched to discredit her from the shadows. It began as a whisper, an offhand comment in a minor tabloid, suggesting she had become too emotionally attached to the children. The piece seemed harmless at first, vague, unsubstantiated. But it was only the beginning. Over the next several days, the media floodgates opened. A sudden wave of articles began to circulate, each more sinister than the last. Reports hinted at inappropriate boundaries, emotional instability, even suggestions of unprofessional conduct. None of it was based on fact. None of it was sourced. But in the court of public opinion, innuendo was enough. She was no longer the beloved caregiver, she was a problem that had been removed. A loose thread that needed to be silenced. Outside her home, paparazzi cars appeared, first one, then three, a camera through the hedge, a lens from across the road. Photographers began staking out her local grocery store, waiting to catch her in something, anything that could be spun into scandal. Her neighbors were approached with leading questions. Her sister received a call from someone claiming to be a journalist, asking about a breakdown that never happened. Friends were contacted by anonymous email accounts offering money in exchange for compromising stories. Her privacy had vanished. And yet, the stories kept coming. Old photos, completely benign, were lifted from her now locked social media profiles and republished with captions meant to provoke suspicion. A picture of her holding one of the children's drawings was reframed as evidence of obsession. A post celebrating a child psychology course was spun as self-diagnosed expertise. Everything she had once taken pride in was now twisted into a narrative of threat and instability. It was no longer about truth, it was about control. She was being erased by design, but she wasn't defenseless. Her legal team quietly launched an investigation, tracking patterns in digital activity and communications. What they found led back to an unexpected place: devices linked to palace-adjacent networks. While the evidence stopped short of direct royal involvement, the implication was clear. Someone close to the institution had authorized, or at the very least, tolerated a whisper campaign to protect the Wales family's public image. And she wasn't the only one who noticed. A seasoned publicist, who had worked on royal crisis strategy in the past, reviewed the media pattern and confirmed what the nanny already knew. This was an orchestrated effort, a calculated smear campaign designed to discredit her before she could speak. But they underestimated her resolve. And they forgot one thing: she had nothing left to lose, and something far more powerful than access to a press office. She had the truth, and she was ready to use it. Still, through the firestorm, she held one last secret close, a truth that would silence every doubt. Tucked away in a sealed envelope, passed down through royal hands, was a letter written decades ago by Princess Diana herself. And inside, a message that not only vindicated the nanny, but exposed the family's deepest vulnerability. She hadn't meant to open it at first. The letter had been given to her by a former palace staffer, someone older, long retired, who had worked closely with Diana during her final years. It came with a simple message: "This was meant for someone like you." The handwriting was unmistakable, flowing, elegant, and deeply personal, addressed not by name, but by intention. "To the one who cares for my boys," it began. The nanny stared at the page, her hands trembling, unable to believe what she was reading. Every word bled with love, fear, and a mother's desperation to protect her children from a system she feared would consume them. In the letter, Diana laid bare her most haunting concern. "Power," she wrote, "will always come before love in this family, unless someone fights to reverse it." She feared that her sons would be raised in a palace of protocol, not compassion. She feared they would be surrounded by people who served the crown, not their hearts. And so she entrusted a plea not to royalty, not to blood, but to someone who would one day be close to her boys and could give them what she no longer could: warmth, safety, truth. The words didn't name a successor, they named a role. "Protect them from becoming too polished," she wrote, "too rehearsed to feel." For the nanny, reading the letter was like having her entire journey illuminated in one devastating moment. Every lullaby sung, every scraped knee cleaned, every bedtime story told. It all suddenly made sense. She wasn't overstepping. She was fulfilling a legacy Diana had foreseen and desperately hoped someone would carry forward. And now, in the wake of the smear campaign, the palace silence, and the public doubt, the letter offered something no press release ever could: truth. With quiet resolve, she shared the letter first with her legal team, then with a journalist she trusted. Within hours, its contents were authenticated and published. The impact was immediate. Public sympathy surged in her favor. Commentators who had once dismissed her story now called for accountability. The press turned their attention from her to the palace. What had they known? Why had this letter never been acknowledged before? The whale's image, once immaculate, was now under scrutiny because Diana's voice had returned, and it was echoing louder than ever. For the first time, the nanny felt seen not as a scandal, not as a servant, but as someone who had protected the emotional legacy of a woman the world still mourns. It wasn't vindication she sought, it was clarity. And now, she had it. Not from a headline, but from a mother who knew exactly how brutal that palace could be. But while the world rallied behind her, the palace could no longer ignore the storm, and a reckoning was now inevitable. With the monarchy now facing a wave of public backlash and the whale's image shaken to its core, the former nanny's truth has forced a brutal question into the spotlight. What is the price of silence, and who pays it? The fallout was immediate. Public opinion, once firmly behind William and Catherine, began to fracture. Approval ratings dropped sharply in just days following the release of Princess Diana's letter and the nanny's account. For the first time in years, the future king and queen weren't being celebrated, they were being scrutinized. Tabloids that once bowed to the palace's carefully managed press lines now ran with a different narrative. That behind the poised smiles and polished appearances was a family too focused on control to recognize the emotional cost of their actions. And the public wasn't just watching, they were questioning everything. Inside Parliament, murmurs turned to motions. A handful of outspoken MPs began pushing for inquiries into royal staffing procedures, arguing that if taxpayer money contributed to these roles, then transparency should no longer be optional. What protections did staff have? Who held the royals accountable when those under their care were discarded without voice or defense? These were no longer hypothetical concerns, they were political ones. Sources close to the family said Prince William was deeply regretful about how it all unraveled, that he hadn't foreseen the damage, that he believed, even up to the very end, that it could be resolved quietly. But quiet was no longer an option. Catherine, too, reportedly made a private attempt to reach out. No fanfare, no intermediaries, just a simple message asking if the nanny would speak with her, not for the press, but for peace. The message was never answered. Far from the frenzy, the nanny found peace not in vindication but in purpose. She moved abroad quietly, far from royal observers, and began working with international child welfare organizations, advocating for emotional development support in high-pressure environments. She has since declined every major interview, every lucrative book offer, and every media appearance. But before retreating fully from the public eye, she offered one final statement, short, sincere, and devastating in its simplicity. "I didn't leave because I stopped caring. I left because I cared too much. The royal family may survive the headlines, the palace may weather the storm, but something irreversible has shifted. The walls that once protected them now echo with doubt, and the world is no longer satisfied with perfect portraits. It wants truth, humanity, accountability." As the palace scrambles to preserve its image, the nanny's voice echoes louder than ever, reminding the world that even behind the grandest walls, the quietest exits often tell the loudest stories. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.